Welcome back to another retrospective review. A pleasure to have you on board. Let's kick off the new year right by covering one of my favorite Japanese RPG franchises of all time. This is Wild Arms. Wild Arms turns 25 this year, and I thought what better way to celebrate this awesome title with everybody than doing an entire series review throughout the course of this year. Chances are you've probably heard of this JRPG series, but it has been one that has been forgotten to time, and if you're Sony, you don't even acknowledge its existence anymore. So let's not waste any more time as we traverse the deserted wastelands of Filgaia and see what the Wild Arms series is all about. If you like what you see, consider hitting the like button, subscribing to the channel, and let's dive into our Wild Arms retrospective. Wild Arms released in 1997 on the PlayStation 1. Developed by Mediavision and published worldwide by Sony Entertainment, there is little information on Wild Arms' development history, but many ex-employees of Telnet Japan's Riot division left and founded the company of Mediavision. Before development had begun for the Wild Arms series, Mediavision had worked on 3 other PlayStation 1 games prior to this: Crime Crackers and its sequel, Crime Crackers 2, and Rapid Reload. Akifumi Kaneko took responsibility of game design, while Takahashi Fukushima took the role of the producer. Other key members who worked on the game was Yoshihiko Ito, in charge of the character design, and Michiko Naruke, who would go on to compose most of the Wild Arms games' soundtracks. It's easy to take a look at Wild Arms' story today and feel that it's a bit dated and cliched, but that's hardly a reason to not play it. There are some elements to Wild Arms' story, particularly with its characters, that I really feel stand out. Let's dive into the premise of the story. Long ago, Filgaia was attacked by metal demons, an alien race from the planet of Hades. Their body are made up of a type of living metal, giving them immense power over the other inhabitants of Filgaia. Ghouls and humans worked together long ago to defeat the metal demons and imprison their leader, Mother. By separating her heart into 3 pieces and hiding them from the other demons, they were able to subdue the attacks and save Filgaia. Once you start up a new game, you are confronted with a character select screen where you will have to choose between 3 of our heroes: Rudy, Jack, and Cecilia. You'll have to play through each of the characters' introductions in order to progress the story and eventually lead them to that fateful day in Adelheid. Wild Arms does something unique in the execution of its story by dividing up all 3 characters' prologues into separate stories. Not only does this give a chance for the characters to develop a bit of a backstory and let the player know what their motives and where they came from were, but it also sets up events that are going to transpire later on in the game, uncovering some of these characters' arcs. So I think it's only fair we use 3 different sections to kind of dissect the prologues and what happens, and setting up each of these characters, and ultimately what prepares them to go on a journey and find their own reasons to save the world of Filgaia. Rudy is a dream chaser wandering Filgaia looking for his place in the world. His adventures lead him to Surf Village, a small farming village just off of the coast, barely scraping by. After finishing up his chores, he is awarded with a Hillberry. Rudy leaves the mayor's house to retire for the night and overhears a young boy has made his way into the depths of the monster-infested Berry Cave. Rudy makes his way to the depths of Berry Cave and retrieves the young boy along with the berry he was after to heal his father. A giant tremor follows after Rudy interacts with a rune in its depths. Rudy and the young boy make their way out of the cave, but a monster emerges from the depths. Rudy uses his arm to fend off the monster and is immediately kicked out of the village, as arms are strictly forbidden in Surf Village. After he is exiled, Rudy makes his way to Adelheid to once again search for his place in the world. Jack and his trusty sidekick Hanpan the Windmouse find themselves in the Memory Temple, in search of the Guardian Blade, a blade said to have immense power. After Jack and Hanpan make their way out of the rune empty-handed, they learn from a hologram a giant named Lilithia is nearby Adelheid. Jack and Hanpan make their way to Adelheid to find out more information regarding Lilithia as Jack continues a search for the absolute power. Cecilia's prologue sees her at the last day of Curin Abbey, a school that teaches young girls how to use magic. Finishing up her magic training, she is making her way back to Adelheid to resume her role as the princess. During her final session, she has a dream. The voice of one of the guardians talks to her and says that there is a hidden library where he is currently locked up. After finding the secret library, defeating the boss, and awakening the guardian, she is told of the imminent threat of the metal demons facing Filgaia, and her role that will inevitably lead to her saving the world. After the excavation of Lithia, the party finds themselves in a battle with the metal demons. They're after Cecilia's teardrop, an heirloom passed down to the royalty of Adelheid. What the demons want with the teardrop is currently unknown, but they are willing to destroy Adelheid in order to get it. During the attack on the castle, the king passes away, and Cecilia vows to go and get the teardrop back from them, no matter what it takes. Alright guys, it's that time of the review where we start talking about spoilers, so if you don't want Wild Arms stories spoiled for you, there will be a timestamp down below you'll be able to use to go to the time on the screen here, or you can use the chapter select. I'll give you just a moment to make your way down there so you do not get the story spoiled for you, and we will meet back up with you when the gameplay section rolls around. Those of you who are still here, let's go ahead and dive in and talk about Wild Arms' story. Turns out the metal demons intended all along to destroy the planet. After the defeat of Mother by the party, Siegfried takes it upon himself to carry out the will of Mother. They needed Cecilia's teardrop in order to reverse engineer it and create the Dark Tear. It was with the power of the Dark Tear they used its dark energy to cause a catastrophe to the planet of Filgaia and force the Guardians to reveal the giant tower Kadingle. Inside is a dimensional elevator, a device used to reach the moon of Malduk. Malduk once served as a mining facility but was abandoned before the Demon War ended 1,000 years ago. Siegfried intended to use the weapon on Malduk in order to destroy Filgaia. Rudy, Jack, and Cecilia make their way to the top of Malduk and defeat Siegfried in one final confrontation and save the world from its destruction. There is a cutscene at the beginning of the game during the title sequence. If you wait a bit, it will start to play. You'll be in the technologically advanced kingdom of Arctica, and you'll see it's falling by the metal demons. During the attack, they try to desperately fight off the demons, but with no success. Princess Elmia stays behind to fight them off, and a blonde-haired man leaves the castle. This blonde-haired man is Jack. Jack ran off to find a power to be able to destroy the metal demons and get his revenge. His constant state of thinking he is a coward comes from this. You see, Jack left behind Princess Elmia, the woman he loved, to fight the metal demons by herself. Princess Elmia, to Jack's surprise, is alive. Her identity is someone you'll be very familiar with, Lady Harkin. She has been changed into a monster by the demons. This is made clear that she has a connection to Jack many times as she is familiar with the fast draw techniques that Jack uses. Oh yeah, and for those of you who are curious, Jack isn't even his real name. His real name is Garrett. Each character is written to represent a trait, and Jack's trait is courage. The feeling of leaving his dying kingdom and not being skilled enough ate at him, driving him to seek revenge for his fallen comrades. It is through the eyes of Lady Harkin he comes to terms with what has happened. He sought the ultimate power and came to the conclusion that power is protecting the ones you love. That is true courage. While it's pretty easy early on to figure out that something is up with Jack, it's Rudy's curveball that's not. After the fight with the main protagonist, Siegfried, he tries to open up a black hole and consume the party within it. He latches an impenetrable wire onto Rudy, who tries to cut it off. Rudy's entire arms ripped off during the process. Turns out Rudy is actually made of the same material as the metal demons, created by the Eels themselves, and locked up long ago. It was Rudy's grandfather Zeppet that discovered him and raised him as his own. In order to restore his arm, they need to make their way to the Eels dimension, which was Filgaia reserved in this dimension as it stood 1,000 years ago, before the rot and decay of the metal demons started. Rudy is the last of his kind, and the others' hearts were inevitably corrupted, causing them to go down the path of destruction. It was Rudy being raised away from all of this that gave him the pure heart. While the heavy conveyed theme here is friendship, it's still done in a very tactful way, as all of the individuals whom Rudy has helped along the way help him out in trying to rebuild his missing arm and reconnect him with his humanity. Rudy represents hope. Even after finding out what he was, being rejected by Sir Phyllis, he doesn't give up his hopes of one day being able to find friends who will accept him and give him the hope he needs to succeed. Throughout Jack's friendship and Cecilia's love for him, he's finally able to fulfill this dream. Out of all the character arcs, I've got to say Cecilia's is probably the weakest of them all. Not to say that it's bad, it just is less effective in its impact. Cecilia's arc opens up with the death of her father and the surrender of the teardrop, a precious heirloom passed down to the women in Adelheid, an heirloom of her dead mother. After her father's funeral, she embarks on a quest to get it back, which happens roughly about halfway through the game. It kinda seems like she doesn't learn much, but the key takeaway she does learn is love and friendship. This is made clear by the ending, and it's just corny, and not going to lie, corny enough it made me laugh, but I've come to expect it from JRPG, so it's not really a gripe. Cecilia's trait is love. It is shown for her constant compassion for her friends and comrades. It's her that wakes up Rudy, after all, from his dream after his arm's been fixed. Wild Arms villains aren't exactly ones I would call memorable. I can't help but feel that the villains come off as too slapstick comedy, and it just doesn't work well for me. I don't find too many of the villains memorable at all, maybe aside from Lady Harkin and Alazad, but that's only because Lady Harkin is so closely tied to Jack's story. I can't harp on the game for this much though, because it was clear that Wild Arms was never focused on making memorable villains, or even trying to focus on villains as a whole. I will say that they are evil and will do anything to achieve their goal, which does make for some satisfying boss fights when you're finally able to defeat them. Alazad though had to be the only main villain I really found myself despising, and it made for one awesome battle when you were finally able to beat the shit out of this bastard of a character. The key to analyzing Wild Arms' story and themes lies within Basker Village and the Yules leaving Filgaia. Wild Arms' story seems to send a pretty strong message about living in unison with nature as the Yules left Filgaia as the world started to deteriorate. There is heavy theming with this, further implied with the Guardians. As the strength of the Guardians waned, we saw them weaken and given one final blessing to push back against the metal demons. I think it's safe to draw a parallel between how much faith and worship in nature or a god has all but been forgotten as technology advances and we care less and less about our origins and the planet that cultivates and sustains us. The metal demons could possibly be seen as a wave of a technology coming in to reform the land by destroying nature. As for Basker Village, it's very reminiscent of the Native Americans, which they were clearly inspired by, and the last bastion of Filgaia striving to live one with the land. Other themes it tackles is friendship and revenge, as we can clearly see in Jack and Rudy's character development. Combat in Wild Arms doesn't change up too much from the turn-based formula it took inspiration from, but is still worth analyzing. Each character has a basic attack, but also comes equipped with unique abilities tied specifically to them. Rudy is the only character who is able to use arms. Arms have different abilities which will be acquired throughout the game. Each of these has their own sets of bullets, limiting the times you can use them in battle. You can always refill these in town, or you can use bullet clips to refill them during battle, but be careful, bullet clips are not super common. Jack uses an ability called Fast Draw, a sword technique allowing him to use multiple attacks and abilities such as stronger attacks, the ability to steal, or heal a character. These techniques are learned throughout the course of the game and are usually awarded to players for exploration. Cecilia serves as the magic user and can learn different abilities and spells to heal and attack. Unlike Rudy and Jack though, these are learned completely differently. You will find crest graphs across the game, but you need to take these to a shop to create spells. We will get more into how this is done in a later section. This does, however, give the player control over what abilities you can use and help during intense fights. Each character will also be allowed to equip one rune, which will in turn let them summon a Guardian of Filgaia for an attack using force points. Speaking of force points, now is a good time to talk about them and what they add to combat. Force points accumulate during battle from being hit and attacking enemies. Once the bar fills up, a message will pop up above the character saying condition green. This will also heal enemy status effects. Each characters have 4 levels of force points. Level 1 will use 25% of your force points, level 2 will use 50 points, level 3 will use 75, and level 4 will use all 100. Next, let's talk about the unique abilities each character has. If you have 50 points or more, your characters will summon the Guardian that they have the rune equipped of. These attacks will be equipped in the equipment menu. Jack's first ability is Accelerate. This will guarantee he gets to move first. It's helpful in a pinch when a character needs healing. Jack's ability Sonic Vision is an attack that will let Jack focus and hit an enemy with a very strong attack. And Jack's fourth and final ability is Double Command, which allows him to take 2 actions per turn. Rudy's first ability is Lock On. This is a surefire way to make sure Rudy's arm does not miss its target, as each arm will have a percentage of how much damage they can hit for. Rudy's Protector will let him take damage for another character, and Fury Shot is the last of Rudy's and grants him the ability to not only lock on to an enemy for 100% accuracy, but allow heavy damage from his arm as well. Cecilia's first ability is one of the most useful abilities in the game. Mystic will unlock hidden potential of an item. What it unlocks I'll let you discover, but it's super helpful early on in allowing you to heal your entire party with heal berries or potion berries. Her second ability, High Guardian, summons your equipped guardian but does a super strong attack, and Dual Cast lets you cast 2 spells during the same turn. Outside of battle is where Wild Arms becomes truly unique. Each character will have 4 tools at their disposal. These tools will be used to solve puzzles across multiple dungeons you will traverse through. Rudy's bombs can be used to blow up walls and other objects, while Handpan, Jack's trusty mouse sidekick, can be used to open out-of-reach treasure chests and switches. Cecilia's watch can travel back a few moments in time and reset puzzles. The puzzles are not hard to figure out. There were a few that tripped me up for a good bit, but I was able to figure them out shortly after. As the game progresses, each character will get more tools, things like a grappling hook or a lighter, a wand letting you talk to animals, and even a radar helping you locate hidden items and treasures. As you get new tools, you'll also start to remember other dungeons had out-of-place objects you couldn't reach before. It's always in your best interest to go back and explore these areas you've previously visited. Something else Wild Arms doesn't do is hold your hand. There'll also be times where your next objective is not clear and you'll need to talk to townsfolk to hear rumors of things going on. This is something I both enjoyed, but there were a few small instances where this did become very annoying. There was one section in particular where I swear I talked to every resident in the town I'd visited thus far, only to discover there was a vortex which was clearly visible on the map, and I had to enter the Dragon Shrine. Stupid me didn't even think to use the Teardrop, another tool of Cecilia's, to talk to the Guardian at the vortex. While I welcome challenges like this and the non-handholdy nature of older games, some people may end up having an issue with this lack of direction Wild Arms offers up. The world map is hidden in a treasure chest very early on in the game and can be easily missed if you miss the treasure chest. The nice thing is though, you can always go back and find the treasure chest the map is sitting in. Let's talk about various different shops and items used to learn and increase each character's special abilities. I'd mentioned earlier Cecilia needs crest graphs in order to bind magic. By visiting magic guilds, you'll be able to bind magic to them. On the sides and top, you will see a list of elements, and move your cursor over these spaces to get a brief description of what the spell will do. Once you decide on a spell, you'll click it and it will bind to a crest graph. You'll then be able to name your spell or keep its default. However, only one spell can be bound to a crest graph at a time. This is where the option to dissolve comes in. Dissolve will let you unbind a spell from a crest graph and then you'll be able to use it again. Something else worth noting is once you gain access to the Outer Sea, you'll also find isolated guilds. Make sure Escape and Teleport are ones you prioritize when you get access to them. Escape lets you quickly escape from dungeons, and Teleport lets you travel to an already visited town. Rudy's arm can be found in a special chest only Rudy can open. These chests are found inside of dungeons and unfortunately can become missable depending on the dungeon. In order to make these weapons stronger though, you can visit the Armsmeister. Here you can increase the attack power, hit ratio, and bullet capacity for each weapon in exchange for Gela. Focusing your effort on these will make Rudy an absolute powerhouse. And lastly is Jack. Certain dungeons and towns or areas you will get a scripted scene with Jack and usually Handpan, where Jack will learn his new fast draw techniques. However, this is only a hint. In order to actually unlock these moves, you have to successfully use them in battle. These will be indicated by a question mark. Pulling these off comes down to RNG, and you'll have to keep trying until Jack finally pulls it off. Along the way, you will come across an item called Secret Signs. These will let you decrease the amount of MP a fast draw technique uses. We do need to talk about the game's graphics though. The 2D sprites of this game look really great. And while I loved the 3D games of the 90s, the graphic art styles that these games used really stood out. There's something to be said about the 32-bit art styles of games such as Wild Arms, Suikoden, Grandia, and Xenogears, using the art style they did that make them stand the test of time. The backgrounds and the look of the game really sell it. Many argue it doesn't feel like a true Wild West setting because of the castle and somewhat medieval setting the game took, but I'd say there's enough there to give it that Wild West look and feel. As great as the sprites are though, the battles, well, let's just say I much would have rather had them use the sprites for battle rather than the 3D images. I imagine this was done to showcase the power of the PlayStation 1, but they haven't aged great, especially with its character design. In battle though, something is oddly charming about this design. If I were Mediavision, I would be finding a way to get royalties from Funko Pops though, because I'm half inclined to believe Wild Arms inspired them. I do think they did a great job with the monster design, especially looking at the era in which Wild Arms was released. I say this with almost every PS1 era game I've reviewed, there is something to the level of charm that comes with these styles of graphics, and while it's easy for me and many others to look past them, it's not for others, and I feel that is going to be a hurdle for many people who are looking to play this game. We cannot talk about Wild Arms without talking about its amazing soundtrack. The music of Wild Arms hands down has to be its strongest feature, and one of the best JRPG soundtracks to ever exist. Mashiko Naruke took heavy inspiration from many of the spaghetti westerns, with tracks such as Lone Bird and The Shire being inspired by The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly's Ecstasy of Gold. The use of whistles, acoustics, horns, and drums come together to give the game a very unique Wild West sound. The opening cinematic song, Into the Wilderness, is an array of how great the soundtrack is going to become. From songs like Courage Dungeon to the town theme, Wild Arms soundtracks never get old. Wild Arms isn't overly difficult either. Most of the boss battles were pretty easy and straightforward, and having Jack and Rudy use their special abilities, most bosses were pretty easily toppled. I do want to reiterate my last point though, the game doesn't always tell you where to go. So unless you're okay with talking to town folks for hints on caves or dungeons, or using a walkthrough, it's going to be a bit of a challenge in that regard. Some minor gripes I do have with the game are in particular how magic carrots used to restore MP are a rare commodity. Sleep can be a hell of an annoying status effect, seeing as you don't wake up after being attacked. In an early game dungeon, this can be a death sentence. I was surprised at how much money was easy to come by, and perhaps this was coming off of Legend of Legaia, which was a game released around the same era, where gold was not of abundance. Wild Arms has always been a game that has had a special place in my heart. I still remember the day I bought a used copy and threw it into my PlayStation 2 to play. This playthrough of Wild Arms reminded me of what made this game so special to me in the first place. There is so much this game does right, and there is also a huge reason it is fondly remembered by PlayStation 1 enthusiasts. Ways you can get this game: it is still available on the PSN Store along with its sequel Wild Arms 2, at least until Sony keeps up those servers. So if you can get your hands on a PlayStation card and pick this up as a PlayStation Classic, I highly recommend doing so. I think that wraps up our retrospective of Wild Arms. Next time we take a look at the series, we'll be taking a look at Wild Arms 2. Until next time, stay safe out there, and most importantly, stay happy, be happy, game happy. Spoons is checking out. If you liked what you saw, I'll leave some links to my other reviews over here you guys can check out, as well as a playlist for all of our Wild Arms retrospectives. Be sure to give that video a like, and until the next video, we'll see you then.